Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. Tonight, the headlines will be surrounding the latest footage that came from the Palestinian resistance about the Israeli prisoner of war who is held in Gaza. Israel constantly tells the world that it's all about the hostages, as they label them. Yet, despite that, they constantly kill them. Now, another confirmation is coming from an Israeli prisoner inside of the Gaza Strip about the recent attacks that Israel carried out against its own prisoners of war inside of the Gaza Strip. And as a follow-up from the previous video that the Palestinian resistance published of a tunnel being attacked by Israel and them rescuing an Israeli prisoner of war. Israel killed almost a third of the prisoners of war inside of the Gaza Strip. And despite that, they are still claiming that this war is about these people, that they want to release them. So we're going to discuss all of the developments on that front, but we'll also talk about the normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. This is a topic that's been very talked about topic in recent years, actually. But now, did Saudi Arabia just completely ditch the idea with their recent statements? And are they joining a new front that is not really interested in anything to do with the peace process with Israel? And then, of course, we will discuss the latest attacks that came from the Palestinian resistance in Rafah. Israel, again, claiming that they are going to increase their presence inside of the Gaza Strip. As a matter of fact, Israel is saying now we've sent tens of thousands of new orders, or order number 8, as they call it in Israel, for people to come and serve inside of the Gaza Strip. But there are big problems facing the government with that order. But before we begin with all of the other things, let's talk about the prisoners of war. So like I said, Israel constantly talks about the prisoners of war, the hostages, bring them back home, bring them back home, bring them back home. You had an opportunity again, bring them back home from day one. The Palestinian resistance told Israel immediately after the 7th of October, we're willing to end the operation and just have a prisoner exchange. Why? Because, well, they've already had 4 Israelis since 2014, but Israel failed to reach an agreement with them. Israel constantly delayed this. As a matter of fact, they were criticized internally by the families of those prisoners, saying that Israel is neglecting them. And Hamas constantly tried to reach a deal with them to release the Palestinians who are kidnapped under administrative detention in Israel, the real hostages. Now, Israel, of course, refused. They went on this barbaric attack in Gaza, and they still are. And constantly they say, well, release them, release them, release them. But the other side tells them, okay, you want us to release them? Fine, we'll release them. We're willing to release all of them, as a matter of fact, all at once. But as a deal, as a full deal, well, ending the war, Israel withdrawing, aid in, rebuilding, all of that. And then, of course, a prisoner exchange. However, Israel doesn't want that. Israel wants the Palestinian resistance to release the Israeli prisoners of war without any sort of repercussions or anything on Israel. Israel wants to do whatever it wants without committing to ending the genocide in Gaza. Now, they still constantly talk about that, despite the fact that there are offers coming from Gaza. And also, well, they've been killing them from day one. They've killed them on the 7th of October. Israel carried out massacres against Israelis in Kibbutz Be'eri, near Oz, Re'im, the Nova Festival. More than enough evidence surrounding that. We talk about that from day one. But then they also started to target the Israelis who were kidnapped to Gaza by ordering the Israeli army, to conduct attacks against everything going back to Gaza. And the people who were going out were confirming day after day that we were targeted multiple times by the Israeli army. Now, the Palestinian resistance declared several weeks back that Israel indeed is carrying out more attacks against the prisoners of war in Gaza, trying to kill them. And now they've released another video of a wounded Israeli prisoner of war inside of the Gaza Strip saying things as they are. And here's that video.
אתה שומע? חכה, חכה, חכה. יעקב, בטח, יעקב. شوفوا جوا.
بار بيتي.
مين بفنين؟ شفتوه؟ يلا نمشي.
אני אסיר מספר 24, מזכיר לכם. אסיר שהתקיפו אותי מיד לאחרי סיום הפסקת האש, ורק בזכות בורא עולם הצלחנו להישאר בחיים. בכבוד זה הורידו אותנו למטרו. והנה עכשיו התקיפו אותנו שוב, הפעם מתחת לאדמה, ושוב בזכות בורא עולם הצלחתי להישאר בחיים. והנה זאת התוצאה של הלחץ צבאית, של המלחמה בשביל להוציא את החטופים, שאדון נתניהו וכל הקואליציה שלו מספרים לעם. המצב שלי הוא גרוע מאוד, אין לי תרופות. על דבר כזה כמו לצאת לבית חולים אפילו לא מדובר. מה קורה עם החבר שלי עכשיו ברגע הנוכחי אני לא יודע מה המצבו. אם הבן של אדון נתניהו או אחד מהקואליציה היה פה, מבטיח לכם שהלחימה הזאת הייתה נגמרת מזמן, וכולם היו יושבים בבית. אבל זה לא ככה, ובגלל זה אנחנו כאן מתחת לאדמה, 59 בני אדם, בני ערובה, שנמצאים בעזה. עכשיו, עוד מעט יהיה לכם חג של יום העצמאות. תגידו לי, איך אתם יכולים לחגוג ברגע ש59 חטופים מתחת לאדמה בעזה? איך אתם יכולים להרים את הדגל, לעשות על האש ולשמוח? אני מבקש מכל העם ישראל לצאת לרחובות עכשיו, לצאת בשבילנו. שום תקווה חוץ ממכם, כולם נגדנו, אם זה ממשלה, אם זה ראש הממשלה, אף אחד לא סופר אותנו, לאף אחד לא אכפת איפה אנחנו ומה איתנו, אתם רואים בעצמכם. בבקשה תעזרו לנו, אני מכנן לכם, אני דורש ממכם, אני מבקש ממכם, תעשו את זה בשבילנו, אל תשבו בבית, אל תיתנו לממשלה לנרמל את המצב הזה. בבקשה תצילו אותנו, הכל זה רק בעזרתכם יכול לקרות, חוץ ממכם אין לנו שום תקווה. והנה, עכשיו, כשאדון נתניהו בטח ובטח שוב יגיד על מלחמה פסיכולוגית. אז אני אגיד לכם מה זה מלחמה פסיכולוגית אמיתית. מלחמה פסיכולוגית אמיתית, עכשיו בתוכי, בלהגיד מה שאני הולך להגיד עכשיו, בכל המצב שאני יודע. ולדעת שהווידאו הזה, אולי זה דבר האחרון שהמשפחה יראה ממני. וזה יהיה הדבר האחרון שישאר בשביל המשפחה שלי ממני. להורים שלי ולילדים שלי.
So that was the video that was published by the armed wing of Hamas about this Israeli prisoner of war who is making this statement from Gaza following the Israeli attack immediately after the ceasefire ended or was ended by Israel. Israel, of course, was the side that broke the ceasefire, not once but twice, initially in the temporary ceasefire and then in the main ceasefire that took place just over 2 months ago, and is still carrying out these attacks against the Israeli prisoners of war. Now, this man is saying it as it is. So the prisoners of war are saying Netanyahu doesn't care about us and they're killing us. The families of the prisoners of war are saying the same thing. Today, the mother of Matan Tsengauker repeated the same thing that she constantly repeats, is that Netanyahu wants to expand the war so that he can kill everyone, all of the Israelis inside of the Gaza Strip. All of the evidence on the ground shows that Israel isn't interested in its own prisoners inside of Gaza, as it's claiming to be through its Hasbara and through its international propaganda machine, and of course its agents in its arms of propaganda globally, claiming that, oh yeah, we want them and release them and get them back. Well, the offer was to release was on the table. You got them back. You started to get them back over 2 months ago when there was a deal, and you can get all of them, and you can get all back tomorrow if you get a deal. But who is preventing a deal? Benjamin Netanyahu and his government, who is claiming, which is the fourth side, that they're not the priority. Yesterday, I spoke about the conflict that happened between the Israeli Prime Minister and the IDF Chief of Staff when Benjamin Netanyahu said that eliminating Hamas or achieving victory is the number one objective, followed by releasing the prisoners of war, meaning that he put the lives of the Israelis he's claiming to protect as number two. So what's victory exactly? Then, of course, his ministers, his primary ministers in the government, who also repeated multiple times that it's not the priority to bring the Israeli prisoners back to Israel. As a matter of fact, they want them killed. They do whatever they can to kill them inside of Gaza, as we have clearly seen. Therefore, again, why is anyone who is, of course, on the other side saying that it's about the Israeli prisoners? It's not about them. It hasn't been about them since day one. Netanyahu wants to get rid of them as much as possible, and this is yet another proof coming from the prisoners of war themselves who are in Gaza. And we share this so that people can actually see what they're saying. These people, because you don't see that. You don't see that on mainstream media. It's as if no one says anything. Hardly anyone brings the people of Israel, the families of the prisoners of war, and the people who say we need to get a deal at any cost. Previous senior figures in the security establishment in Israel said that we need to get a deal at any cost, even if that cost means a defeat for Hamas. They know that very well. And it's not the fact that Netanyahu isn't willing to reach a deal with him submitting to the demands of Hamas. It's him not wanting to reach a deal for his own interests. Because if he would want to reach a deal tomorrow and he is protected, he can get away from court, remain in his position up until the next elections, he will sell it to the public. He will sell it at least to his cult. He, of course, has good excuses. Sounds convincing when he's talking, as if he's fully confident. Psychopathic traits as well, totally detached from reality. And he will sell it to the public, like he sold to the Israeli public before, that Hamas are in Gaza, fine, no problem. And like he allowed hundreds of millions to go into the Gaza Strip, of course, as part of an agreement between him and Hamas, because they couldn't defeat Hamas multiple times before. That was in relation to the Israeli prisoners of war and what's happening on that front. Moving on, Israel is now declaring that it's recruiting and ordering tens of thousands of Israelis to go and join the war inside of the Gaza Strip. But there's a very big problem. And that big problem is, well, who's going to go? Who's going to go? Who's going to fight? And who's going to actually listen? You have over 50% refusal rates inside of the state of Israel. And now it's becoming mainstream. So mainstream media in Israel is admitting outright that, well, it's going to be problematic for the state of Israel to go and bring people back. So there was this report in one of the Israeli media outlets saying that tens of thousands of eighth orders, or number 8 order, they call it in Hebrew, Tzav Shmone, being sent The operation in Gaza will be expanded. They're saying many are evading. The environment is less inclusive. Okay. So that's an attempt coming primarily from Benjamin Netanyahu. He wants to send more people to Gaza, more people to fight, despite the fact that he just received a report from the IDF chief of staff telling him that it's going to be hell. He said there's going to be a horror scenario if we send more troops to Gaza. There is no plan. They are suffering tremendously. And more people don't want to go and fight. Israel resorted to sending people who are untrained to Gaza, people who are wounded, people suffering from PTSD, some of them who have never been to Gaza before. And if they were in Gaza before, they were there 3, 4, and 5 times as well. People who are totally demoralized, lack of motivation to fight whatsoever, because they know they're going to the same places where they failed previously, and the resistance became stronger in those locations, which leads us to the resistance. Now, again, Israel is saying that they want to expand the operation inside of the Gaza Strip. They want to have more people being sent, expanding the genocide, talks about seizing territories inside of the Gaza Strip and controlling Gaza. With Netanyahu no really declaring that there's anything coming anytime soon in terms of a ceasefire. But consecutively, we have more and more attacks happening. And now Israel is confirming. 2 soldiers killed and 4 others injured in an ambush inside of the Rafah area, south of Gaza. This is the same area that Israel has been saying for the past several weeks that it expanded its forces in. As a matter of fact, Israel is publishing maps online and on mainstream media too, that the perimeter in Rafah has expanded tremendously, meaning that Israel is no longer only on the Philadelphia corridor, what's labeled as the Philadelphia corridor, but has expanded it several kilometers to squeeze in the population. Now, where that in terms of presence on the ground might be true in certain locations, at the end of the day, there is no control whatsoever. And that's why they're having these ambushes in Rafah, and not only in Rafah, but in other parts of Gaza too, central Gaza, North Gaza, on the perimeter or the buffer zone, what Israel calls the buffer zone. But now they're getting another ambush inside of the Gaza Strip after the massive ambush that yesterday the armed wing of the PIJ spoke about, exploding an MK-84, 2,000 pounds or 1 ton in multiple Israeli vehicles. And now this is happening again. And these soldiers, by the way, who were killed in this ambush, according to reports from Israel, they were from an elite unit. It's called the Yahalom or Diamond Unit. This unit is specializing in finding and destroying tunnels. They specialize in detecting tunnels and destroying them. That's an elite force in Israel. This is what the ambush was against. So it's not like your normal troops or paratroops or whatever brigade. No. Elite unit being targeted, killed and wounded. And what are they doing? Going and trying to find tunnels. I mean, look at them. They're sending them like randomly to try and find tunnels. When so many Israeli soldiers, by the way, were buried in tunnels already. I mean, many of the tunnels in Gaza are booby trap tunnels meant to trick the opposing forces for them to come in, to learn them to come in. Booby trap tunnels, they explode them in. The son and the nephew of the previous war cabinet member, Gadi Eisenkot, both of them were killed that way in Gaza, trying to find tunnels. The Palestinian resistance would lure them in and kill them. So these people were killed now, not even before they even got to the tunnel. Before they got to the tunnel, they were detected by the Palestinian resistance, and there was a very large ambush that killed at least 2 and wounded at least 4. Now, Donald Trump, similar to his previous term, he's facing problems. There are big similarities between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu in the way that their government coalitions or their members of cabinet or ministers, they're not really solid. They're not solid. They're not steady. They don't have steady coalitions and governments and people around them. Donald Trump previously, every Friday, he had someone being replaced. Bolton, White House spokesperson, people close to him. And we're seeing that from the early days now. But the most significant one was now Mike Waltz. Now, there has been a lot of talk surrounding Mike Waltz and the reasons behind Donald Trump taking him off. And there was this report in Israel saying that, no, actually, Mike Waltz, they're saying in the US that he was an Israeli agent. The controversy that led to the impeachment, Mike Waltz acted as an Israeli agent in the eyes of the US government. I thought they're all agents. I mean, if Trump himself gets over 200, how much did he get? 200 million or 200 billion? How much did he get from the 200 million from the Israeli lobby? But they're saying that, hold on a second, this man is, so what, is there another level of agent? But they're saying that. So clearly there's something going on there. I mean, there's some evidence to support that there's a conflict inside the Trump administration in relation to Israel, because many people were sacked or were forced to resign. Adam Bowler was one of them. Trump refrained from putting people in power who were viewed as critics of Israel too. But this report said the National Security Advisor was removed after he promoted a policy of aggression against Iran in coordination with Netanyahu, contrary to the president's position. Rubio was appointed as an interim replacement in a move that could weaken the National Security Council. Of course, that's Israel saying weaken the National Security Council. And of course, there was another report in the Washington Post about this. But the main thing that's coming out of this report is that Mike Waltz was a very close figure to Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was coordinating with him heavily. I mean, come on. Jimmy Carter himself, the previous US president, said that no congressman is able to criticize Israel. That's if we're talking about congressmen, by the way. And he said if any congressman criticizes Israel, they'll make sure he's not there in the next term. Track AIPAC shows you exactly how much these people are paid to go and act on behalf of Israel inside of the United States. And this lobby exists in other countries too, European countries, other countries as well. However, clearly there's something going on, because Trump, although there's ups and downs, although he has contradicting statements, although he does U-turns and 180s, he made statements that indicate that he's looking to de-escalate and reach a deal with Iran. His last meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, that was very short, that Benjamin Netanyahu was called for, saw Donald Trump asking Netanyahu to be reasonable. They were discussing the situation with Turkey, with Syria, with Iran too, and Donald Trump's recent statements in relation to Iran were statements of, oh no, we want to get a deal. We don't want to escalate. However, that totally contradicts the Israeli policy. Especially Benjamin Netanyahu, who was a key figure lobbying for the United States or for the state of Israel in the United States, so that the United States can go and actually have a war in Iraq, and now he wants him to have a war with Iran. Now, this actual move from Donald Trump is showing that there is some conflict. There are different opinions. There are different opinions inside of the administration, especially when it comes to the United States having certain actions in West Asia or in the Gulf that are more pro-Israel than they are pro-America. And that's an argument that, politicians don't really speak about much. It's only people who criticize the policies. Are you acting on behalf of the United States or are you acting on behalf of Israel? Now, There's no denying that the United States already acts on behalf of Israel. As a matter of fact, in Israel, they're confirming that. There was this report in one of the Israeli newspapers saying that make Hodeidah ours. Israel estimates this is the goal the Houthis is trying to reach, in reference to the Houthi attacks against Israel and how they are still conducting attacks against Israel and escalating these attacks. A day ago, 3 ballistic missiles and 1 drone sent on multiple parts, targeting Haifa, targeting the Ramat David base, targeting Asqalan, and targeting Jaffa, 2 strategic locations. That's aside from their attacks against any genocide-linked ship in the Red Sea. Again, any ship linked to Israel. Conditional. Of course, these attacks are conditional to stopping the genocide and lifting the siege of the Gaza Strip. And in this report, the reason why I'm bringing you this report is that they're confirming in this report that Israel doesn't have to go and attack in Yemen, doesn't have to travel thousands of miles, put itself at risk, because the United States is doing a really good job. Therefore, the United States is acting on behalf of Israel in Yemen and giving Israel an easy life. They have their aircraft carriers, they have bases, and they're carrying out these attacks. And Israel is sitting there thinking, well, we don't have to go and do anything there because our greatest ally, the United States, is having these actions. However, this report is showing you that there are people in the administration as well in the United States who are willing to do all of that for the sake of Israel. However, on the other hand, there are other elements inside of the Trump government who are trying to change things around. So you can call it a lobby battle. You can call it a priority battle. There's no denying that the United States administration has been a participant, a contributor, and an enabler of the genocide in Gaza. It's still butchering people in Yemen, the United States government, on behalf of Israel, for the sake of Israel, likewise with the United Kingdom as well. However, clearly there are internal differences, which leads us to the recent report about Saudi Arabia talking to the United States and telling the United States before their projected meeting not to talk about Israel. What's happening? I thought Saudi Arabia was supposed to join what's maliciously labeled as the Abraham Accords, as if any of these people have anything to do with Abraham, even though, you know, they're trying to portray it as, oh yeah, we're brothers and the Abraham Accords. But Saudi Arabia was the main target behind what's labeled as the Abraham Accords. By the way, Benjamin Netanyahu has been lobbying Saudi Arabia for decades now, trying to get some recognition from them. But he failed. He failed. And whether you're a critic of the Saudi authorities or a fan of the Saudi authorities, they haven't had peace with Israel. But the recent developments, not only relating to this report that I'm going to be talking to you about now, are showing that there's something happening in Saudi Arabia and its outlook for the future too, and its position. So there was this report here. It came in the Middle East saying Saudi Arabia told the US to keep Israel normalization off agenda for Trump visit. Meaning, well, Saudi Arabia, the country that Israel has been lobbying to have a peace treaty with for so long, and they were the main aim behind what's labeled as the Abraham Accords, they're no longer interested about having a peace deal with Israel. Why? What happened? Joe Biden, in his previous term, he had a deal for Benjamin Netanyahu that would bring the Saudis on board, and that's it, make them part of the agreement of the Abraham Accords and have peace with Israel. What's happening now with Saudi Arabia? Well, firstly, according to this report, they told the United States, don't talk to us about normalization with Israel. We don't want to even talk about the subject. You can talk to us about defense, security, and economic coordination. economic cooperation. Why? Because they have offers coming in from China 24/7. The United States is still trying to be appealing. Of course, they have interests, but the Saudis know that they have other cards that they can play, and they're not going to be tied with Israel for forever, or tied with the talks surrounding having peace with Israel for a very long time, especially seeing as there are other options, and especially after the constant Israeli crimes that Israel has been conducting inside of the Gaza Strip for so long, and the arrogant statements that came from Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, is this the only report that's showing that Saudi Arabia is changing its approach towards Israel? No. Saudi Arabia, after the deal that they had with Iran in 2023 that was brokered by China, they started to have military drills. That took place in October 2024. They started to increase the ties more senior visits in Saudi Arabia. That was highlighted primarily by the latest visit that the defense minister had in Saudi Arabia. Saudi defense chief, when he met with Khamenei in what was labeled as a historic visit, he also met with the top IRGC figures inside of Iran. And when he was in Iran, he made statements about the importance of Muslim countries standing together against the Zionist entity. The Saudi representative in the ICJ, in his recent statement in support of Palestine and against Israel, he was using terminology that we haven't been hearing from the Saudi officials for a very long time. Things like barbaric aggression, the genocide in Gaza, apartheid regime of the state of Israel. And now this is being also highlighted by the Saudi officials, telling the United States, don't even mention the normalization with Israel, don't even talk about, don't suggest it, as a prerequisite to meet them, by the way. So they're telling the American administration, they're telling Trump, you want to come, ahlan wa sahlan, welcome, no problem. But don't even bring that on the table. We're not interested in talking about normalization with Israel. Now, there were contradicting reports in the past 2 years, and one of them said Saudi Arabia is actually happy to make a deal with Israel, even if Israel has a ceasefire with Gaza. So they're no longer actually interested in having a Palestinian state. The Saudis immediately denied that. Likewise with Benjamin Netanyahu, when he made statements, when he made his remarks about the Saudis having enough land to bring Palestinians there, to have a Palestinian state there, immediately had a backlash by Saudis who targeted him heavily. But the main thing here is things are changing. And clearly what we're hearing in mainstream media, well, it hasn't really been reflecting the actual truth, right? Usually we deal with a very small amount, small percentage of the real news, the reality of what's happening. But especially in relation to or any potential deal coming between Saudi Arabia and Israel, this couldn't be further away from the truth. And now they don't even want to talk about the subject. And if you don't even want to talk about the subject, and you're simultaneously meeting with Iran, you're having your defense minister you're having military drills with Iran, that totally goes against what the greater strategy of Israel and the United States was in the region. The United States included with Israel, by the way, although there would be some differences, because clearly there are certain times you'll see a different interest from the United States and Israel, although they're so tied. Israel's plan was to bring Saudi Arabia to its side against Iran. Israel, and of course in a typical colonizer's way, the Sunni allies, they'll tell them. They'll tell you the Sunni allies, and they're butchering Sunnis in Gaza and in Syria, but they want the Sunni alliance against Iran. All garbage, of course. And some people fall for this sectarian propaganda. However, the reality on the ground is different. And these moves are heading towards the right direction. They're still far away from what's needed and what's required. However, the fact that foes, right, competitors, so to speak, like Iran and Saudi Arabia have been so far apart and at odds with each other, threats for a very long time, coming together, Saudi Arabia even ditching the talk about normalization with Israel. These are very important developments, and that shows you the real geopolitical position of Israel. It's much different than what they like to portray it as it is. You see, both Israel, its allies, and some of the doom and gloom prophets are telling us that's it, it's the new era, they're going to divide everything, they're going to... No, that's part of their plan, to portray it like that. But in reality, they're actually losing influence, they're losing momentum, and they're losing in the bigger picture in the West Asian region or the Middle East. Because if Saudi Arabia ditches the talk altogether, well, what are you going to do? Saudi Arabia, even if they aren't taking the right position or the required position, like many Arab states are, towards the Palestinians who have been suffering for the past 80 years, if not the past century, but primarily with the latest genocide in Gaza that's still taking place, well, that doesn't mean that things are going well for Israel. No, they're not going well. And by that, they're losing in the long term too. Why? Because, well, if you're still committing this genocide in Gaza, you're simultaneously attacking Lebanon, attacking Syria, threatening Jordan. They've recently, some in Israel, made very serious remarks against Egypt too, bullying everyone. Well, everyone's going to see you for what you are. And if you had a policy of divide and rule in the region, or bringing some sort of alliances towards you against a bigger threat, and they view that bigger threat as Iran, well, that plan is failing. And there is no prospect of reaching any deal. And that's primarily not only from the crimes that Israel is committing and has been committing, but of course they went on steroids with their crimes, but it's also for their stupidity. This is political stupidity. This is political ignorance coming from the leadership in Israel, led by Benjamin Netanyahu. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. As usual, I hope I connected the dots and provided some interesting information for you. In the meantime, everyone, stay blessed, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace. Salam.